Today in the episode, Saratov, one of the biggest oil refineries in Russia, ablaze. Russia mobilizes all men ages between 18 and 55 in the occupied territories of Ukraine for the war with Ukraine. NATO has drawn up a defense plan in the face of the growing threat from Russia. The Czech Republic plans to recruit 2,250 soldiers next year, a record number in the country's history. According to the Ministry of Defense, approximately 28,000 people currently serve in the Czech armed forces, and interest in military service rises steadily. The increase in recruitment is also due to plans for reform and modernization of the Czech army, as well as the need to respond to new security threats in Europe. The Ministry of Defense is intensifying its efforts in training, cybersecurity, and equipping troops with modern equipment and weaponry. Additional troops are needed for the maintenance of new armored vehicles and Leopard tanks, and to expand the Czech Republic's participation in NATO missions.
Almost daily, we defend ourselves against Russian ballistic missiles. We need to continue destroying Russian military aircraft. And all of this requires a multi-component air defense system. And this is our military aviation. And solutions exist for both the Swedish Gripens and the French aircraft. And we also are working on the F-16. I am talking about air defense and missile systems for them, as well as the development of mobile combat groups. And of course, the priority now is interceptor drones. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, in his daily address as of November 2nd, 2025.
On November 19th, Brussels will present a project to adapt EU infrastructure to military needs, according to the European Commission's website. This involves developing regulations for the uninterrupted movement of troops and equipment in case of emergency. This is not a bureaucratic initiative, but rather the operational integration of the defense infrastructure of the European Union and NATO, explained the Center for Combating Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine.
The plan includes coordinating the use of trucks, rail platforms, ferries, and all transport routes capable of moving tanks and artillery. To this end, border procedures will be simplified and mechanisms synchronized with allies to ensure that allied troops can move without delay. Poland, Germany, Romania, the Netherlands, and the Baltic states will become key transit hubs. Europe is making waves and not making empty announcements. Andriy Kovalenko, director of the Center for Combating Disinformation of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Ukraine's long-range capabilities are key to forcing Russia to end the war. The greater the range of Kyiv's attacks, the shorter the war will be, according to Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga. In his view, Ukraine's potential in this area is growing rapidly. Moreover, the number of successful attacks against legitimate military targets in the Russian Federation is increasing every week.
This is a well-calculated, precise, and sensible campaign, designed to weaken the Russian military machine and force Moscow to end the war as soon as possible. In the future, Ukraine's long-range arsenal will serve as a deterrent and a guarantee against any future Russian aggression. The war that Russia unleashed against Ukraine is returning to its origins, and rightly so. The sooner the Kremlin understands this, the sooner it will make the only sensible decision to end this war. Andriy Sybiga, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Ukraine has repeatedly expressed its readiness to engage in realistic negotiations with Russia anytime, anywhere. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, stated this on air during the United News telethon. However, according to him, such meetings are best held at the leadership level, as only then can decisions be reached. Russia, on the other hand, usually sends sham delegations to the negotiations, which simply lacks a mandate to discuss peace.
The negotiation platform in Turkey has allowed for the resolution of several humanitarian issues, such as the increase in prisoner and body exchanges. However, no significant progress has been made so far. Nevertheless, Turkey is always ready to act as an effective organizer and a solid logistical partner, which is very positive. That is to say, Turkey has an interest, given its fundamental interest in peace in the region of its interests, the Black Sea region. Turkey is undoubtedly prepared at any time to organize the negotiation process as quickly and effectively as possible. Another issue, which I will return to later, but will summarize here, Russia is not ready, first, for a genuine negotiation process, second, for an end to the war, and third, for Putin to stop living in this painful reality in which he is immersed and in which he revels in mass violence. Mikhailo Podolyak, the advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine.
In October 2025, Russia set a new record for the number of missile attacks against Ukraine. Russian occupation forces launched 270 missiles, 46% more than in September, and the highest number since 2023, according to AFP. The attacks primarily targeted the country's energy infrastructure, forcing the government to reinstate temporary power outages. In response, Ukraine intensified attacks on Russian oil depots, triggering a gasoline shortage in the Russian Federation and weakening financial support for the war. Russia has begun a new mobilization of men between the ages of 18 and 55 in the occupied territories of Ukraine, including the regions of Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk. According to Kukarchuk, deputy commander of the Russian Third Army Corps, the Kremlin plans to send between 50 and 100,000 conscripts to the war against Ukraine to reinforce the front and replace mounting losses. The mobilization is being carried out forcibly under military control, with reports of arrests and threats against those who refuse to report. The decision comes after Putin signed a decree officially incorporating the occupied areas into the Southern Military District, with the aim of consolidating Russian control over these territories and fully integrating them into its military structure. The Ukrainian Defense Forces eliminated 1,160 more Russian soldiers in the last 24 hours, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In addition, Ukrainian defenders destroyed 5 Russian tanks, 6 armored vehicles, 45 artillery systems, and 1 cruise missile. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, the Russian army has lost a total of 1,144,830 soldiers. They have also destroyed 383 drones and 123 motor vehicles and special-purpose vehicles. Atesh guerrilla fighters conducted reconnaissance in the area where the Russian army detachment guarding the Kerch Bridge in temporarily occupied Crimea is located. The group is based in Konstantinovska Bay in Sevastopol. They were able to determine the location of all the docks, the observation post, boats, and vehicles within the base. An attack on this military unit would weaken the protection of the Kerch Bridge and reduce the Russian occupiers' presence on the peninsula. All the information was handed over to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, Atesh reported. This night was also not too calm in Russia. Drones attacked the city of Saratov, and according to preliminary reports from Russian media, the target was a local oil refinery. This plant is one of the oldest in the Russian Federation and is part of the Rosneft group. Loud explosions were also reported in the city of Engels, in the Saratov region, where a strategic airbase is located, from which Russian bombers launch missiles against Ukraine.
Precision strikes were also carried out against occupier logistical facilities in the temporarily occupied territory of the Luhansk region. Specifically, a supply depot in the town of Roskoshna and a train of rail cars carrying fuel and lubricants in Dovzhansk were hit. The defense forces continue to conduct a series of operations aimed at destroying critical elements of the terrorist state's military and industrial base, with the goal of depriving it of its capacity to continue its aggression. From a report by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram.
On Monday night, Russia launched 3 Kinzhal air-launched ballistic missiles, 4 Iskander-M ballistic missiles, and approximately 140 drones against Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian Air Force, air defenses managed to shoot down one of the Kinzhal missiles and neutralize 115 Russian drones in the north, south, and east of the country. Missile and drone impacts were recorded in 11 locations across Ukrainian territory. In the last 24 hours, 162 clashes were recorded on the front. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the most intense area was the Pokrov sector, where Russian troops attempted 68 assaults against Ukrainian positions. On the Oleksandrivka front, the defending forces repelled 29 attacks, and in the Kostiantinivka sector, 18. In the Kupiansk area of the Kharkiv region, the Kremlin occupiers launched 13 assault attempts, while on the southern Slobozhansk front, especially near Volchansk and neighboring settlements, the Ukrainian defenders halted 12 offensives. The Ukrainian Defense Forces halted the advance of Russian occupation troops in the Kupiansk area of the Kharkiv region after launching a series of precise attacks against them. This was reported live on the United News telethon by Viktor Tregobov, head of the communications department of the Joint Forces Group. According to his statements, Russian plans to advance toward the center of Kupiansk are failing. The Kremlin's army attempted to concentrate units in the northern part of the city to prepare for new assaults, but the invaders' positions were detected by Ukrainian troops, who carried out several accurate and high-impact attacks. Expanding on the previous information, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed the attack on the oil refinery in Saratov. A fire broke out at the plant after the impact was recorded in the processing area. The Saratov refinery is one of the oldest in Russia and until 2023 processed approximately 5 million tons of crude oil per year. The General Staff also reported the destruction of several Russian military logistical targets. NATO has developed a concept for a fortification line on the eastern flank, according to Die Welt, citing a source. The Supreme Allied Commander Europe has already presented the document to his delegates to the bloc's member states. The document proposes a plan to reinforce the alliance's positions and repel a possible Russian offensive. More information follows in a story.
On November 19th, Brussels will present a project for adapting EU infrastructure to military needs, according to the European Commission website. This involves developing rules for the seamless movement of troops and equipment in emergency situations. This is not a bureaucratic initiative, but an operational integration of the defense infrastructure of the European Union and NATO, explained the Center for Countering Disinformation at Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council.
The plan includes coordinating the use of trucks, railway platforms, ferries, and all transport routes capable of carrying tanks and artillery. To achieve this, border procedures will be simplified and mechanisms synchronized with NATO so that Allied troops can move without delays. Poland, Germany, Romania, the Netherlands, and the Baltic countries will become key transit hubs. Europe is preparing not declarations, but routes. Andrei Kovalenko, head of the National Security and Defense Council's Center for Countering Disinformation, on Telegram.
Military mobility is one of 9 points in the EU's Military Industry Strategic Development Roadmap. The document defines flagship areas: air defense, infantry, and naval forces; heavy artillery, countering cyber threats. For Ukraine, this opens up a range of opportunities, experts believe. Primarily, it concerns the potential of Ukraine's defense industry and military technologies. In these sectors, Kyiv's experience is invaluable to partners. Additionally, the participation of Ukrainian companies in joint European procurement and production consortia means gradual unification of standards and certification procedures, thereby accelerating compatibility with NATO.
We came to a unanimous understanding that yes, we have problems with our defense capabilities. We need to strengthen them. You know, it's better to do this as much as possible in coordination with each other, and the European Union institutions do not replace NATO in terms of authority or decision-making. Andrius Kubilius, European Commissioner for Defense and Space.
This roadmap is having clear objectives, clear deadlines, and clear monitoring as well. Of course, it is up to the member states finally, because the member states are in driving seat, but it clearly helps them to achieve these goals, to also do things together.
The program of large-scale rearmament and strengthening Europe's defense capability became a response to Moscow's aggressive policy. NATO has prepared a plan to deter Russia on the alliance's eastern borders, writes Welt, citing sources. It is called the concept of the deterrence line on the eastern flank. The document spans 4,400 pages. According to media reports, Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Christopher Donahue, presented the concept to delegates from 32 member states. The main emphasis in defense will be on drones and autonomous weapons. It also plans to deploy more heavy weaponry along the eastern border and improve communication between the armed forces of alliance countries.
The number of Western military personnel here is growing. NATO countries are sending their troops who participate in exercises here, and we will have the largest training ground in Northern Europe built closer to the Russian border. Our defense is being strengthened not only by our Army and National Guard, but also by our partners, and we are proud of that. If Russia doesn't like it, that means we're doing something right.
The reorganization of some Russian military districts is causing serious concern in Brussels. This will lead to an increase in the presence of Russian troops on the borders with the alliance, explained the head of Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service. Reported by Andriy Dimitrenko, UATV News.
That seems to be it for today. Please subscribe to our channel so to stay tuned to what is going on in the world, seen from Ukrainian perspective. Goodbye.